All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Thomas Elmore. I'm chair of the Connecticut Historic Preservation Council, and I'm calling to order the June 2nd, 2021 Historic Preservation Council meeting. With me this morning are the following council members: Beth Ackley, Beth Burgess, myself, Margaret Faber, Leah Glazer, Kathy Mahar, Christine Nelson. Sarah Nelson will be with us in a little bit. Sarah Sportman, Walter Woodward, and Ellen Zappo. We have a quorum, so we'll start the meeting. The following is the Historic Preservation Council's format and review of public comment procedures. Given the online format of today's meeting, and for those who are visiting today, I want to review and explain our procedures. The order of the presentation: I will read each motion and ask the motion to be moved and seconded. Staff will present the agenda item to the council. Council members will have an opportunity to ask questions. If called upon by staff, a representative of the organization may offer statements or address council's questions. For members of the public who wish to speak to an agenda item, we ask that you identify yourself and your affiliation. After all questions have been addressed and statements made, a roll call vote will be taken. If members of the public have letters and/or other written statements they wish to submit to the record, please email them to jonathan.kinney@connecticut.gov, and that's JONATHANEY@ct.gov. The Historic Preservation Council takes statements from members of the public but does not respond to questions. Lastly, please only address the particular item being addressed at that time. The following is the Historic Preservation Council's policy regarding conflicts of interest. The Historic Preservation Council votes on matters which provide leadership, service, and economic benefits to property owners, consultants, local governments, and not-for-profit organizations. Given this responsibility and to maintain the highest professional standards in the discharge of our duties, it is important to maintain a strong code of ethics for all council members and department employees. In order to avoid possible violations of the Department of Economic and Community Development ethics statement, it is necessary for the council to be aware of any situations in which there is a real, potential, or apparent conflict of interest involving anyone here. A conflict of interest may occur when a public official's participation in agency matters results in personal financial gain. All council and staff have been provided a copy of the Department of Economic and Community Development's ethics statement and governing state statutes. Having reviewed them and today's agenda, members of the council and staff are asked to disclose any affiliations with entities or projects that may create a conflict of interest as defined by agency policy and pursuant to Connecticut General Statute 1-79 through 1-89, entitled Code of Ethics for Public Officials. Once disclosed, the member or staff may recuse themselves from that particular agenda item. Having read this statement, are there any council or staff members that would like to disclose a conflict to any of the items on today's agenda?
I would. This is Sarah.
Hey, Sarah.
I think I probably should recuse myself from the Avon Survey and Planning Grant discussion.
Okay. Thank you.
I have one too. I don't know if it's a conflict of interest, but I did walk through the Congregational Church of Plainville steeple project a year and a half ago with the possibility of working on it, and it didn't end up turning into a project. And I also have worked in the neighborhood of the Wyndham Inn, and have also walked through the Wyndham Inn and given some informal comments on the structure of that building.
So,
Is that Beth?
On your first item,
Yep.
has that been let? Are you going to be going after the project for the steeple?
I have not been in touch with them since since that happened, there was a disconnect, and I actually dropped the ball. They had wanted to us to put a proposal together, and I dropped the ball and didn't do that. So that may be a true conflict of interest there. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I would say, looking back, if you're not going to be going after the project, then there's no conflict. If there's the potential that you might be because of the grant funding, then I think I would ask that you recuse yourself.
Yep. Okay. I will recuse myself. I don't know if I will or not, but certainly don't want to cross any lines.
Okay. And then for the second one, doing work in the neighborhood, you know, I don't think that's an issue. But again, if you're going to be asked to submit a proposal for the planning part of the Wyndham Inn, then I think there as well you should recuse yourself. But if you're only going to be, it's a planning project as I understand it, but they may need some structural assessment. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't be a prime on that, but there may be some structural issues to address on it.
If there's the potential that you might be on a team, then I think we should have you recuse yourself there as well.
Okay, absolutely.
Excuse me, that was the Wyndham Inn, and which was the first one?
The Congregational Church of Plainville. And yeah, it's Beth.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Actually.
Anybody else? Okay. Recused members are asked to leave the meeting platform. Staff will send you a text message when you can return. That brings us to the first agenda item is the review.
Hey, Tom, I'm sorry, this is Jonathan. Can I just confirm that I have correct contact information for Sarah and Beth before we move forward, just so I can get them back into the meeting?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Hey, Sarah, can I call you at the phone number that ends 5248? Is that a good number to reach you?
No.
Okay.
Use my cell phone number.
Okay.
It's 860
Yep.
617
Yep.
6884.
6884. Okay.
Thanks.
And Beth? I have 337-0200. Is that okay?
Again, my cell phone's the better for that.
Okay. Yep.
It's area code 617
Yep.
407
Yep.
6236.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
Absolutely. Second. Okay. So first item on the agenda is the review and approval of the April 7th meeting minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes that have been presented for this month's review? The only one that I have, Jonathan, and we spoke about it before, is the motion for Sarah Sportman. I have it being made by Sarah Nelson. I reached out to Sarah Sportman and she doesn't recall whether or not she made it or not, which is fine.
Very good.
So
I will check that out. And I'll also mention that prior to the May meeting, Marguerite had also provided comments, and I've already incorporated those into those minutes.
Okay, that sounds good. So may I have a motion to approve the minutes as revised?
Kathy, motion.
Christine, second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes. I'll take a roll call vote. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
I'll abstain. Margaret Faber,
Abstain, I was absent.
Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Kathy Mahar,
Aye.
Christine Nelson,
Aye.
Sarah Nelson, is she here yet? No, that's fine. Sarah Sportman,
Aye.
Walter Woodward,
Excuse me, I will abstain. I wasn't there.
okay, and Ellen Zappo. Jonathan, is Ellen with us?
Sorry, I was unmuting. She just emailed me. She is trying to get in now.
Okay.
Yep.
I think we'll wait for her because we need her vote to carry the motion.
No problem. Oh, there she is.
Okay. Ellen, we're taking a vote on the approval of the meeting minutes for the April 7th meeting. Have you had a chance to look at them? Ellen, if you can hear me, can you unmute yourself?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
We are taking a vote to approve the April 7th meeting minutes, and we're down to you on the list.
I did review them and I will vote in favor of approval.
Okay, very good. Thank you. The motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the review and approval of the May 5th meeting minutes as part 1 of the meeting. Are there any corrections to be made to the meeting minutes as presented?
Tom, this is Beth Burgess. Under section 4, survey and planning grant for the Calkins Family Association. Second paragraph of discussion, I think there's a typo. Says Ms. Dunn replied that it may not need to be as large as a SIN as is required for HRF funded construction projects.
Okay.
Just, I think that's a typo. I'm not sure what it's meant to be.
It should be sign.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I hope it's a typo.
We have a pretty low sin threshold.
So Jonathan, I have one on item 4.a. I have 8 yeas and 2 abstains in my notes.
Okay.
And then, and 5B.2, my notes say the second was made by Christine Nelson.
Okay, I'll double check those.
Any other comments from anybody? Okay. May I have a motion to approve the minutes as, or with the revisions as noted?
Margaret, so moved.
And a second?
Christine, second.
I'm sorry.
Take
Okay,
it back.
race again. All right,
Kathy can have it.
Kathy Mahar gets a second. Okay, so a roll call vote on approving the minutes as with the noted revisions. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
I'll abstain. Margaret Faber,
Aye.
Lydia Glazer,
Aye.
Kathy Mahar,
Aye.
Christine Nelson.
Aye.
Is Sarah Nelson with us yet? No? Okay. Sarah Sportman,
Aye.
Walter Woodward,
Aye.
and Ellen Zappo.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Next item on the agenda is the review and approval of the transcript as meeting minutes for part 2 of the May 5th meeting. Are there any corrections to the transcript as presented? Okay, may I have a motion to approve the transcript as submitted?
Kathy, motion?
Second.
Okay, a roll call vote to approve the transcript. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
I'll abstain. Margaret Faber,
Aye.
Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Kathy Mahar,
Aye.
Christine Nelson.
Aye.
Is Sarah Nelson with us?
I don't
Sarah
see her yet, Tom.
Aye.
Walter Woodward
Aye.
and Ellen Zappo. Ellen, we didn't hear you.
Sorry about that. Yes, I vote yes.
Thank you. The motion carries. Thank you. So the first item on the agenda for grants, the Historic Preservation Council votes to recommend the award of a surveying and planning grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. The applicant, the Town of North Stonington. The project, architectural plans and specifications to support the restoration of the John Dean House, circa 1732, on Hewitt Road in North Stonington. Grant amount for $15,000. Is there a motion to bring the item to the table?
So moved.
Kathy,
second?
Well, do that again, please.
Yep, Deborah, we have
Christine and Kathy.
Christine Nelson for the motion and Kathy Mahar for the second.
Thank you.
Mary?
Okay, good morning, everybody. So staff does recommend approval of the application. Last August, we awarded a survey and planning grant to the Town of North Stonington for an assessment. That project was competitively bid and is considered the first phase of the entire project. So as noted in the application, the town has already is working with the architect that they originally selected competitively. So the budget and scope should be pretty solid. A representative from the town could not be here this morning, but I'm happy to take any questions or comments that you have.
Mary, I have a question. It's Beth Hackley. I didn't see this in the conditions assessment. I might have missed it. But it sounds like they are working, the town is working to, create a series of projects with this building. Do you have a sense of what is beyond this project that's coming forth in this grant application?
I believe that I need to take another look. I think part of the assessment also included some feasibility, but once they get these plans and specifications, they do plan to apply to the Historic Restoration Fund grant program, and then eventually put it into use, which may actually include a caretaker tenant.
Okay. And just a follow-up question to that. I think that they, in their grant application, they provided some notes on a long-term preservation plan, but they hadn't actually put one into place. I mean, this is, I guess, just a general comment, but given all of the wonderful work that's in this conditions assessment, I think it would be fairly easy to extract some of that data so that they just have a list, and so some of the deferred maintenance can stay top of mind.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
There actually is a list.
Yeah, I mean, that's
on page 7.
Okay.
It's just a general list, but there is a list.
Okay.
it's
Okay.
sort of, they call it their informal plan. But, you know, a condition assessment will generally prioritize needs and projects. And sometimes an applicant will include the condition assessment as their preservation plan. North Stonington didn't present it like that, but they did list things that are, you know, on their minds moving forward. And the condition assessment should also direct the planning.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Sure.
So Mary, it's Kathy.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi. So maybe Jenny knows this. Just in reading the narrative, it's a really broad history. It was kind of all over the place in both documents. So it was hard to get a linear understanding of the history of this particular site. Is the house, or does it have to be listed on a certain criteria? I mean, is it just listed for its architecture only? Is it listed with its history only?
Well,
It didn't say either.
and that's a good question, and Jenny might be able to chime in, but this house is listed individually on the state register as a result of the 1966 survey that the state did. So there is probably, you know, what's in the application is what the town knows. So we might recommend that they, you know, update the listing, which.
Yeah, because it's a lot of information and it's all over the place with years and dates and different sites. So it was hard to focus specifically on this. And of course, I'm going to say that Mary's name should be included. Apparently they had no children, and she was a second wife, but she is cited in the document as living in the house too.
Well, and that'll be a benefit of recommending that they actually update the listing so that they include that information. The 66 survey, if you're not familiar with it, you know, just really consists of one page and a tiny picture and spotty address. Not all of it, but many. But it does make the resources eligible for funding. But that is, you know, I think as we move forward, when I see properties like that, especially one that is possibly an 18th century property resource, we can recommend that they move forward with at least a state, you know, a nomination.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, there's tons of great information. It just needs, I think, to be curated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I can chime in with Kathy on that, I felt exactly the same way, that this is I couldn't tell if the limitations were in what they were able to find or how they presented it. So, but what it ends up with in the history sections of this house is a kind of hash where you're left to figure out what it's really about. And I think another pass at the history where they just do a little judicious editing or reflection on what they have would be very helpful to contextualize it.
Yeah.
And to your point earlier, the original plan was to come up with a feasibility study. What they presented in the plan was kind of like the boilerplate stuff. You know, we didn't have a lot of meat to it. What did I write? They had a bubble diagram. I am not a fan of bubble diagrams. They're just confusing. I think a little obsolete. But they're looking for reuse suggestions. So I'm hoping that they do a deeper dive and do some analytics, you know, about their demographics or who their intended demographic is going to be to make that a more than just an architect's, you know, textbook answer. Well, we're going to look at doing this and have this. I think it needs more of an industrial operations mind frame to look at it to determine what it's going to ultimately be to benefit the community, because they were absolutely, you know, adamant to bring out that we're going to do the best thing for this community, you know. So looking for the experts who do that, I think, is a good idea.
No, I think that's an excellent point. The grant we gave them last August was non-matching, and so, you know, it was a little bit of a far-reaching. However, you know, as they move forward, especially if they're going to get, you know, plans and specifications to actually move forward with restoration projects, you know, it would benefit them to kind of take a step back and do a public, you know, component, so they don't move too far down. I mean, right now, you know, they want to, you know, protect the resource, but in order to get into the reuse, I believe they're gonna have to do a deeper dive, as you say. And they can certainly apply for a grant for that.
This is Jenny. I'm here. I'll never back down from a suggestion to do an update. But I just want to remind everybody, since Connecticut Historical Commission was established in '55 and predated even the national preservation laws, we have an incredible amount of early designations. And it would not be feasible to update everything all at once. Certainly is reasonable to ask people to update as they apply for things, but I just wanted to get that idea out there because at the same time, we don't want to limit access to our programs. But just wanted to give Connecticut a little credit for having so much listed so early.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and not only that, Jenny, that early listing got the ball rolling for this site. You know, who knows what happened if it hadn't gotten listed back then. So, any other comments or questions? Christine Nelson, I saw you getting ready to ask something.
I just wanted to comment. I really enjoyed reading the original conditions assessment and the recommendations at the end. I imagine that the town really benefits from that itemized list of things to do. So I think that this application for the grant is a logical next step, and I'm all in favor of it.
Okay.
Right. Thank you. Any other council members? Anybody? Mary, you said nobody from the applicant is
No.
with us? Okay.
Right.
So before we vote, this is Beth Ackley again. Given that we've sort of put a couple of suggestions out there, and as a relatively new council member, how could we respond with a positive, but maybe some suggestions? How does that generally work?
When I notify the grantee, if they're awarded a grant, I generally do share council comments, which they can also access with the recording. But we do, I can convey these recommendations, and I think in this case it does sound like the council would like to see both an updated nomination, if possible, and a more public involvement in feasibility exploration. So I guess to answer your question, I do pass along comments with strong recommendations, and see how they can respond to those.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right. So we have a motion to approve the grant. Beth Ackley?
Aye, with the conditions that, the conditions are presented by Mary for future projects.
Yeah. Let's have that motion. That wasn't me. Beth Burgess?
Okay. Aye.
I'll abstain. Margaret Faber?
Aye.
Leah Glazer?
Aye.
Kathy Mahar?
Aye.
Christine Nelson?
Aye.
Is Sarah Nelson with us yet? I don't see her. Okay, hang on a second. Sarah Sportman?
Aye.
Walter Woodward?
Aye.
And Ellen Zappo?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda. Item 5B.2, the Historic Preservation Council votes to recommend this award of a survey and planning grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. The applicant, Congregational Church of Plainville, UCC, project consulting services of a 36 CFR qualified architect and appropriate team to prepare a condition assessment for the steeple of the Congregational Church of Plainville, UCC, circa 1850, located at 130 West Main Street in Plainville. Grant amount $9,000. Before we get started, did Beth recuse herself, Jonathan?
She did. She just left the meeting.
Okay, very good. May I have a motion to bring this to the table?
So moved.
Who was
Beth
that?
Burgess. Yeah.
Thank you. And a second?
Second, Margaret?
Very good.
Okay.
Discussion, Mary?
Great. So staff does recommend approval for funding. As noted in the application, through a historic preservation technical assistance grant through Preservation Connecticut, they did have some assessments done, and they have started working on some of the priority needs. But as discussed in the application, they recently discovered that the steeple is becoming or is structurally unsound and unsafe. And so they would like to get an architect in there to focus on that specific feature and make recommendations for its restoration, stabilization, and repair. The representative from the church could not be here, but I can try to answer any questions or take comments from you.
Questions? Council?
I'm sorry, who was the first person who, I got,
I got Beth
people
Burgess for
making
the,
noise out here.
yeah, I got Beth Burgess with the motion and Margaret Faber with the second.
Thank you.
Kathy?
Yeah. So again, I'm always going to fall back on, for something that high, there needs to be some kind of drone or bucket to get up there and see what the heck is going on. I don't know if 9,000 is going to accommodate that. If they believe it is. A lot of steeple talk today. Yeah, so the budget detail maybe needs to be reassessed to incorporate something that's really going to give detailed information. And I was just wondering if the clock factored into any kind of plan in the restoration.
That is a really good question about the clock. And I don't know the answer to that, but I can find out. We did fund a clock restoration earlier this year, so that might take a different specialist. Regarding access, I also was concerned about access, and the applicant said that they were able to get people up there from the inside to assess things from the inside. I don't know if the exterior needs as much assessment. However, they did informally consult with a number of professionals, and this was the scope and pricing that they came up with. I can definitely ask about the clock, but my answer, or the answer to my question regarding access, was that they felt people had enough access already to even make the initial. I mean, some churches take the steeple off and restore it and put it back on it. That is definitely beyond the budget, but they're comfortable with it.
Anyone else?
I have a comment, Tom. It's Beth Burgess.
Uh-huh.
The narrative section is very light. I mean, it's clear that there's some good bones here, but I could use a little bit more information about the church itself, their role in the community, the services they provide. And I mean, I think the argument for the need is there with the steeple, but the rest of it is very short.
Yeah.
I imagine there must be more information from the previous applications that could have been transferred in.
From the Connecticut Trust applications, that's and I should have asked for that. I also thought the narrative was a little thin, but I think they were focusing on this specific need. However, it is part of the application that they discuss the resource, its significance, and also a little bit about what they do as an organization. So that's probably on me for not pulling more out of it. A lot of that wasn't even in the initial pass. So sometimes it takes a little bit to get the information out, but I can certainly focus on that moving forward better.
Mary, can you update us on why the steeple wasn't part of the earlier project?
I don't know, because the earlier projects weren't funded by us or not supervised, but monitored by us. However, and I can find out the actual answer to that, but it might have been because of access. I don't, apparently, according to the church, it is very easy to climb up into the steeple. So I don't know. I don't know why. I didn't review the earlier reports because they weren't funded by us, but I have it seems from the narrative that they didn't realize that it wasn't part of the assessment, which is kind of strange. But
it's Margaret. I just have a question for Mary. You haven't seen it, have you? Do you know how urgent this matter is?
Aaron, I don't know if Aaron is on. Aaron has done a site visit.
Yes, I'm on.
But it was a while ago. And I think, Aaron, didn't you suggest that they come to us for this purpose?
I live down the street from this church. It's very visibly tilting away from the building. It needs to be assessed. And the reason that it wasn't included in the original assessment was that I believe the architect doing it passed away during the project, and so it was kind of like a hectic study, and it just got overlooked. So it was unfortunate on many levels there. So, but the need is definitely urgent.
Okay, yeah, that's important. Thank you.
Yeah, this is where I wish Beth was not recused so she could inform us all. But the photographs are pretty telling, and for the layperson, which we all would be in this situation, except for Beth. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, so we have a motion in front of us to approve the grant. Beth has recused. Beth Burgess?
Aye.
I'll abstain. Margaret Faber?
Aye.
Leah Glazer?
Aye.
Kathy Mahar?
Aye.
Christine Nelson?
Aye.
Is Sarah with us yet? Sarah Nelson? Sarah Sportman?
Aye.
Walter Woodward?
Aye.
And Ellen Zappo?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item, Jonathan, would you have Beth Ackley come back, and Sarah Sportman, you're going to step out?
Sure thing.
Okay. All right. Next item on the agenda is item 5B3. The Historic Preservation Council votes to recommend the award of a surveying and planning grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. The applicant, the Town of Avon. Project, nomination of Archaeological Preserve designation Brian D. Jones, Paleo-Indian Site in Avon. Grant amount $10,000. May I have a motion to bring this to the discussion?
I
So
move.
Walter made the motion. A second?
Kathy?
Second, Margaret.
Second, Margaret Faber. Okay. Mary, discussion?
Sure. So, as noted in the staff does recommend approval for funding. and you're all probably already aware of the origins of this. Department of Transportation was doing a project and came across what is now considered to be the oldest human contact site, not just in Connecticut, but New England. So it's an extremely important site that needs to be preserved and protected. It has already been named after Brian Jones, who was our former state archaeologist. And so now they want to take the formal steps to give it archaeological preserve status or designation, which does carry some statutory protections against, vandalism, obviously, but just against, inappropriate use. There isn't anybody from the town of Avon here, but I'll be happy to field any questions or comments.
Mary, this is Walt.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much emphasis put these days on inclusion of indigenous groups in decisions involving indigenous materials. And I know with a paleo site, that gets really complicated. But I wonder if in a study like this, if there is some way, or even if it's necessary to include maybe the recognized tribes of the state or someone, it's a tricky issue, but the lack of inclusion can lead to real problems down the road. So.
Absolutely. And I'm a little out of my expertise area here. I would rely on maybe Kathy to chime in. However, I do rely on Kathy when we're doing the request for proposals for a project like this.
I'm sorry, I didn't see Kathy, or I would have just came right at you.
That's okay. So I will say I would normally put something like that in, Walt, because this project went through such a thorough federal process. There was Native American engagement throughout that. And all of those are carefully recorded in the records. And even though the final report has not been done, I think whoever is contracted to do this work will have access to all that information. So it is definitely implied throughout, putting an explicit statement in there, it could happen, but there has been, like I said, 5 years of consultation regarding this project and site.
Right.
Thanks, Kathy.
It's a very nice tribute to Brian.
Absolutely. Yes, Christine.
I have to use the right mouse. Is there a difference in designation between the application says it's pursuing historic nomination, and it seems from there, then the town will consider whether or not to pursue state archaeological preserve designation? Are those two separate things, 2 steps?
You want me to take this one, Mary?
Yeah. Thanks.
So there was some hesitation within the town, and it does not necessarily have to be a 2-step process, but I've kind of been processing the archaeological preserve designations that way. And what the 2-step process becomes, if there is not already a state or national register listing, to prepare a state register listing, and then the designation can follow that. And the reason why I've kind of created that 2-step process is because we have some preserves that were passed early in the program for which there's not good information, so I don't really know what the preserve boundaries are and what exactly it's protecting. So I've kind of turned it into a 2-step process. The hesitation for the town is they still wanted, while they see all the benefits of designation and preserve status, they just want to, they didn't have the opportunity to run this by the town or talk with all the parties that might be involved in it. So I think that's why there's a little bit of a withholding language in terms of moving forward with it in the future.
Okay.
Does that answer your questions?
It does. It does. I have a second question. let's see, regarding the scope of work, it said, it was in defining the boundary. It said something along the lines of, at the town's discretion, they might pursue additional geologic research or testing. So it said at the town's discretion. So does that mean if it fell outside of the funding amount, they would cover that?
It actually, it's related to two things. One, going outside their funding amount. The second is, while the town owns a large portion of where we believe the site is fully located, it may go into other areas that are privately owned. And so the town said they would be willing to work with those private landowners, but there could not be a guarantee for the grant.
So just in terms of meeting the, I guess I don't know that it's a contract, but the agreement of the grant, I wouldn't want it to be held against the town, I guess, for not fulfilling its obligation. It seems a little murky, like at some point, the state or the town might say, well, that's not what we agreed to. And I'm not sure, I can't actually invent a scenario, but I worry that it's a little murky.
In terms of, so I'm just going to ask for some clarification. So it's a little bit murky in terms of, and what was that statement again? For doing the geological?
Let me find it. It's under project activities. And it says, while research regarding the artifacts recovered from the bridge replacement is ongoing, the town will request that the consultant approximate the extent of the site within the town's property. This may require additional geologic research or testing at the town's discretion.
Okay, I'm sorry. I know what that means now. So we did not know there's several forms of geologic testing that we could do. They can stick with just a GPR survey. And what we're looking for is this particular landform that the site is associated with. And the GPR can likely tell us what the extent of that landform is. The other thing that might be helpful is to do geoprobe cores. And the reason why those would be done at the town's discretion is because this is still active fields for passive recreation, as well as soccer practice and some other things. And so at the town's discretion was more about timing and location of where potential geoprobes would be located.
Okay, all right.
This stuff was all in my head, and I guess I should have put it on better paper for them. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I'm just, I don't know. It occurred to me that, that could be a moment for lack of satisfaction later. Thanks.
Kathy, I have a follow-up question on Christine's first question. If part 1 gets done and part 2 doesn't get done, does that leave the project hanging?
No, it won't leave the project hanging. And actually, I think, so the part 1 would be the state register nomination and the part 2 would be the archaeological preserve designation. The town is actually more interested in the preserve designation than the state register nomination. But the reason why I wanted them to structure the grant this way is because it would force them to use the nomination structure as a way to get all of that information codified in a useful manner. They may skip the state register nomination and actually go with part 2, the designation.
So if they do the nomination, will landscape be a major component of it as to why it was the site that it was? Why was it?
Has to be.
Right, okay. No, I agree. I just wanted to ask that. Okay. Kathy Mahar, you're itching for a question.
No, because I had the exact same question Christine did. Does the archaeological preserve, chicken before the egg kind of thing? So Kathy, you answered that. Right. So are there different protections? I mean, under both of these?
Yeah, so the thing that's really interesting to me is the town wants the preserve designation, which is actually in statute. There's criminal penalties if you harm a site that's designated as a preserve. And that can include jail time and substantial fines. That is actually what the town wants. For whatever reason, they're very hung up about the state register listing. And I think that's just more of, a perception of either coming from the Protection Act or something else, that they won't be allowed to do what they want to with their land, which honestly, I keep trying to explain to them that the preserve has the much stronger protection language in it, but I don't understand why that state register is what's holding them up.
Kathy, this is Leah. In terms of content, in terms of what goes into each of these nominations, is the state register one more, I don't know, more historical research as opposed to maybe basing a lot of it on the archaeological? Or I'm doubting there's a lot of historical research able to supplement what's already been discovered there, but is there a content difference?
No, it's not so much a content difference. It's really, I've been using the state register nomination form as the structure of a technical document.
Okay. Anybody else? Well, sounds like a great project. So we have a motion to approve the grant. I'll take a roll call vote unless there's any other questions. Beth Ackley?
Aye.
Beth Burgess?
Aye.
I'll abstain. Margaret Faber?
Aye.
Leah Glazer?
Aye.
Kathy Mahar?
Aye.
Christine Nelson?
Aye.
Is Sarah Nelson with us?
Yep, aye.
Oh, there you are. Welcome. Walter Woodward?
Aye.
And Ellen Zappo?
Yes.
Very good. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jonathan, would you pull Sarah back in for us, please?
Sure thing.
We'll give her just a second.
While we're waiting for Sarah, could I just tell Ellen that it's so nice to finally not be the last car on the train anymore?
You're welcome.
Thanks so much.
All right, I see Sarah back. Next item on the agenda is 5B.4. The Historic Preservation Council votes to recommend the award of a surveying and planning grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. The applicant, Wyndham Preservation Incorporated. Project feasibility study for the reuse of the Wyndham Inn, circa 1783, located at 4 Scotland Road in Wyndham. Grant amount is $20,000. Before we get started, has Beth Ackley stepped off? All right. I'm going to say that he's quiet is a yes. May I have a motion to move this to the table?
This is Sarah. I make a motion.
Sarah Nelson?
Sarah Nelson.
And a second?
Kathy, I'll second it.
Kathy Mahar, a second. Okay. Discussion?
Thank you. So staff does recommend approval of this application. Wyndham Preservation is a relatively new but enthusiastic group up there. They're very anxious to restore this house, but even more put it into use because it has been vacant for so long. They, as you saw in the application, they did do, there was a structural assessment done oddly to support demolition of the property, but it did not. And they appear to have avenues of funding to do the actual construction for the restoration. But it's always a good idea to maybe have a use in mind prior to that. And so I think a feasibility study is a good first step. Gwen Bruno is here from Wyndham Preservation to answer any questions or take comments and answer any questions that I can't.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning, Gwen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for considering this application. And
Council
thank you to
members,
Mary for her help.
Any questions from council members? Comments?
So Tom?
Yep.
Kathy?
Mhm.
What a surprise. So thank you for being here. I'll direct the question directly to you. It's wonderful that there's such community love and passion for this place, and certainly gone through a lot of effort to figure out a strong, beneficial, adaptive reuse for everybody. Do you have in mind how you're going to craft the bid document and what you're going to look for and what your expectations of their deliverable will be? Would have been really helpful to see something like that. There are a lot of different directions a consultant could go. And the guidance from you is going to be critical, and your community is going to be critical in that. So I was just wondering if there was any depth or if you had a range of consultants that you were going to seek that would meet your needs.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I was up last night doing first draft of an RFI. Our mayor, Tom DeVivo, and our state rep, Susan Johnson, are both WPI members. We do have memberships, and our members pay annual dues and receive benefits. And they are fully on board with restoring the inn, and they have pledged small city block grant funds. They would like to see the inn get back on fully on the tax rolls. We're asking for this feasibility study because, as you saw in the grant application, everybody's got ideas about how this inn should be repurposed. It's a very much loved building in the community. Everybody wants to see it restored, but everybody's got different ideas. And because it has been neglected for so long, and I wouldn't say it failed as multifamily housing, as I understand the building was condemned because there's a bulging exterior wall. We've also done some work on that, but in order to pour the funds, blood, sweat, and tears into rehab, we really want to understand from a feasibility study what the best options are for sustainability. We don't ever want to see the inn look the way it does today. We want it to be successful, and we want it to be profitable, in its reinvention. And we're really not sure. We have a lot of competing voices. Put a coffee shop in there. Don't put a coffee shop in there. Make it professional offices. It was multifamily for so long. And I have my own ideas, but I really, and I speak for the board, we really want to understand before we charge ahead with a certain use, what would be the most advantageous and have the highest chance of success.
Yeah, so you really need a charrette to get the thought partners together to make those decisions. If you're a membership organization providing benefits, you exist as a 501c3. So then would the site actually go back on the tax roll?
Well, as I understand it, if it becomes a multifamily housing again, and it was this last iteration, then we would need to pay taxes.
Yeah.
And that's fine, as long as we can afford that. We obtained nonprofit status for a number of reasons, but we actually negotiated and received the inn as a donation from its previous owner. And so we were able to offer that owner a tax write-off, that previous owner.
Yeah. And yeah,
I'm sorry.
no worries. And whatever you do, I mean, there's economic impact beyond just the physical structure. So that would all emerge through your study.
There's the inn needs the inn needs quite a bit of work. And what we're doing now, since we do have a dedication of the Small City Block Grant funds, is we're separating the we're taking a look at the work the inn needs, and we're separating it into what we can do without a specific designation, and work we need to do, like the roof, like the bulging wall. No matter what this inn becomes, we're going to need to address that. Representative Susan Johnson, I'm going to close the door. Excuse me. We adopted 2 rescue dogs. Oh, thank you. Thank you. They're very protective. Not vicious, just protective. And but at any rate, we're looking at the repairs that need to be done right now. We were asked to get quotes. At this point, we think it's just estimates for work to be done in preparation for being part of the 2022 Small City Block Grant application. And we were specifically asked for our estimates for roof repairs and the bulging wall. And we have actually enlarged that to get an estimate for all repairs that would be needed to return the building to viability before we determine the use. And I can pull up this RFI. I just sent it to the board last night. I could share it. Board, I could share it with this group right now, but we're looking for a full plan rather than just indicate specific piecemeal repairs. And we want to get a total assessment of what it will take to return this into viability. So we listed the entire laundry list. We have an idea of who we may want to invite to bid on this RFI. There will be a formal RFP process as required, not only by the town, but Small Cities Block Grant. We plan to participate, but we need to have some idea of the funding that we will need. We also anticipate that this restoration will be done over successive years as opposed to 1 year. But we believe that a feasibility study will actually chart a specific path for us rather than just a general restoration. With your permission, I can show you the draft for the RFI. I pulled it up on my screen.
I don't think that's necessary. I see Sarah has a question, and I have a question based on what you just said, which was very informative. Thank you. Sarah?
Thank you to the applicant for bringing this project, and thank you to Kathy, who sort of teed up some of the question that I was going to ask. But one of the things that I was thinking about as I was reading the information that you put together was just what I, as a consultant, think about when I'm responding to a request for proposal. And this gets to what Kathy was sort of talking about too, in terms of defining the expectation about what you want the consultant team to provide, because feasibility study is such a broad term and is used differently by different consultants. And so, for example, you're talking about understanding the costs, which is important. Do you actually want somebody who can do a pro forma for the different uses? So that would include not only the restoration costs, but also what sort of carrying costs, operating costs, and return you would get for the investment. And if you're thinking about the sort of public process of investing in a building, that might be important for you. And so just encouraging you to get very specific about the level of information that is going to be most beneficial to you, so that when consultants are responding to the RFP, they're putting together a team that you need. And it'll be an easier apples to apples comparison.
And I appreciate the input. This has been somewhat of a learning experience for me, and I understand there are different types of feasibility studies. We are most interested, we're dedicated to restoring the inn. And in fact, the engineering report that was developed to tear the inn down, I think in fact supported its restoration. As writing goes, I think it was embellished, and I think we can probably restore the inn to use for somewhat less money, and see a future. But we're specifically targeting a reuse, a feasibility study that will show us what reuses would be the most economically feasible, what would have the best chance of success. We would like a professional's guidance to tell us perhaps professional offices aren't the best value or have the best chance of success. And it may be housing, and it may be housing for a certain group, or it may be a reuse that we haven't thought of. We are almost solely geared towards sustainability, financial and environmental sustainability for this building. But I have been taking notes, and I understand we have to be very specific, and I will take this information in consideration for the request for information, but even more so for the RFP that we will undoubtedly have to write later this year.
Christine?
Question for Mary Dunn. I know that you have probably a lot of examples that the applicant could look at for RFPs for feasibility studies, but also just your experience. I'm sure you'll have some say in what's included and some suggestions for the applicant in writing their RFP, right?
Yeah, luckily, well, I mean, as it happens, we have funded a number of these over the years, and so we get the benefit of what worked, what didn't work, how the applicant best extracted the best information. So yes, we have we obviously staff is that's part of the job, is to help guide them to decide what's the specific deliverable, what's the scope of work, and then hopefully find the best consultant for the job.
Go ahead, Christine.
Just to follow up on that. So we see the Connecticut Trust putting together pro formas a lot in support of preservation and non-demolition. Are they available to perhaps give technical assistance, maybe their circuit riders or Brad himself, even maybe to sit on the review committee at the municipal level?
They certainly are. That's the purpose of the Circuit Rider program, and within the Circuit Rider program, there's a technical assistance consultant line item. So yes, and in fact, it helps to have a third party or a non. It's not appropriate for someone from our office. We can't influence, but that's what's one of the benefits, one of the many benefits of the Circuit Rider program is their expertise in these.
Interestingly enough, I had sent an email last night to our circuit riders, thanking them for their assistance at a previous meeting and letting them know the RFI and asking their assistance. So it's, I'm grateful to know I'm on the right path.
The one question that I had when you were giving your in-depth discussion earlier, you had mentioned that you were looking for some budget numbers and then you were going to be doing your feasibility studies. I would recommend you do your feasibility studies first and then get your budget numbers. So your budget numbers are project specific or result specific instead of really generic, especially considering how fast material costs are going up at this time. So the numbers you got 6 months ago are going to be way out of balance to where they are today.
Okay.
So,
Thank you, Thomas.
yeah. Anyone else? Sarah, your hand's still up. Do you have another question?
Need to take it down.
Okay. All right. If there are no other questions, I'll take a roll call vote. We have a motion to approve the grant. Beth Ackley has recused herself. Beth Burgess?
Aye.
I will abstain. Margaret Faber?
Aye.
Leah Glazer?
Aye.
Kathy Mahar?
Aye.
Christine Nelson?
Aye.
Sarah Nelson?
Aye.
Sarah Sportman?
Aye.
Walter Woodward?
Aye.
Ellen Zappo?
Yes.
Very good. Motion carries. Good luck. Have fun.
Thank you
Good
so
luck,
much.
Gwen.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Mary, I'll be back in touch with next steps.
Yep. Okay.
So, okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
I'm going to leave and get back to work. Yeah.
Jonathan, would you reach out to Beth for me, please?
No problem. I just texted her.
All right. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 5B5. The Historic Preservation Council votes to recommend the award of a Partners in Preservation grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. The applicant, Connecticut Landmarks Project, services to develop a digital tour experience for 5 of Connecticut Landmarks' 10 sites statewide. Grant amount $18,701. May I have a motion to bring to the table for discussion?
Kathy, motion?
And a second?
Sarah
Aye.
Nelson, second.
Sorry.
Sarah Nelson, second. Okay.
Right, thank you. So staff does recommend this application for funding. In fact, SHPO has used this technology or like this, you know, the digital tour experience for Old Newgate Prison. So I'll be happy to take questions. Aaron Markovich from Connecticut Landmarks is here to answer any questions or take any comments.
Hi there.
Hi, Aaron. Yes, Kathy.
Okay. So I'm wondering if there are so many digital platforms that are more robust tools for virtual tour experiences for museums. I'm familiar with Matterport, and the only word to describe it is very cool. You know, it's really laser mapping that you can, you know, do measurable points and all that groovy stuff when you look at it. But as far as getting deep into a virtual tour experience where you're actually able to integrate content from each site, each institution, it doesn't really allow that much. You can upload some narrative, which is fine. There are other platforms now that allow you to integrate YouTube videos or your own made videos. They have multi-language opportunities. You know, this is a global situation. I don't believe Matterport does. So I'm wondering if Landmarks is locked into this particular firm to do the work, And certainly they'll give you, everybody, something beautiful and a lot of fun to play with as gaming is integrating into our culture. But there are, Flipgrid comes to mind. Flipgrid also allows you to, which is a UNESCO educational award-winning tool for museums. They're a gold partner of Microsoft. You can insert Flipgrid in it, which is for teachers to create a digital conversation with students that's secure. So there are other platforms that might provide deeper immersive experiences. If they're just going for a site that can give you measurable and a little bit of content information, that's perfectly fine. But if they want something more robust, there might be other firms to look at.
Great.
Dead in your silence.
I don't know if I'm supposed to respond, so just do let me know.
Sure, Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we're open to everything. First, I'll stick around for the public forum and say more. But thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Brand new, 10 months on. So thank you for this. And obviously, I'm coming in going, hey, we should at least bring our houses up to 20th century at least, if not the 21st century. So let's do some digital stuff. So I'm very open to it. I'm used to Flipgrid with my son for digital learning, so I will dig a little bit more into that. Matterport was definitely the one that came across, and Connecticut League of Historical Organizations had a big program on it, and the guy sells it really well. So there's some really great things about it, but I'll definitely dig in more. And if folks have suggestions, always willing to hear.
Well, welcome, Erin. It's really nice to meet you. I'm down at the Barnum. But yeah, you're absolutely going in the right direction. I mean, this is the path. Yeah, and Beth is shaking her head. So you're absolutely right. I'm just wondering if maybe explore beyond, because I know that Matterport is a favorite of Connecticut. But in my investigations, I found stronger opportunities for us to more vibrantly tell the story and the depth of the story that teachers could use as well.
Cool.
Because at some point, somebody's got to curate that if it's a virtual tour. And I don't know if you even own the IP. That's a question too, if you even own the IP, because every time I go to one of those experiences, it sort of takes you back to the Matterport site, not your site. So ownership of your property digitally is a question. Because I think ultimately all of this can get uploaded into the Connecticut Digital Archive, and I don't know if you can interface with them. I'll shut up now.
Sarah, you had a question?
I think Walter and Margaret had their hands raised first.
Okay. Margaret?
Thank you. So I know it's not a pre-development grant, but again, I'm wondering why no long-term preservation plan is required. I mean, I would think just, anything we fund with taxpayer money, I would love to see a long-term preservation plan. And I assume Connecticut Landmarks has one for each property. So that was my first question. And secondly, I think it's a great idea. The Amasa Day House hasn't been open for years, and I really miss it. And I can't wait to see it again. So thank you.
I'm just going to, for the long-term preservation plan, yeah, why not? It's a Partners in Preservation grant. We do ask about it, you're correct, for pre-development, just to make sure that applicants aren't, asking for something like, in a vacuum, or not looking at, whole picture. But it's always interesting to as maybe as part of the narrative of what the organization, what their mission and activities are, it would certainly merit asking about what their long-term preservation. Of course, Landmarks has 10 sites, so it might be lengthy. However, that's a good suggestion.
It's just that if we're funding it, it's good to know that they have a plan to preserve it.
Yep. Yeah.
And just as an aside, Margaret, I'll tell everybody later, but July 10, I would love to have any of you come down to Amasa Day. We're having a members program. Come and take a walk through.
Can't wait. I'll be there. Thank you.
Great.
Walter?
Yeah. Hi, Aaron. Welcome aboard. Bet you're having fun. I had a great time going through the links that you provided and found myself thinking what a great idea this is. Trying to read the book titles on the bookshelf in the Avery Cop House was really interesting. I was that close. But I share some of Kathy's, I think, excitement about the possibilities of doing. The walking tour idea is beautiful. I mean, it does stimulate the appetite to see the property, but there's so much more you could do to provide content, I think, and that's a balancing act. So I just want to encourage you to think about the possibilities. It may not be possible within the budget, or it might not even be, you may not have the bandwidth to do it at this point. How did you come to choose the 5 properties instead of all the properties? You have 9, right?
Well, we can all debate on how we count these. I'm going with 12. We have 2 at Hempstead, so that sort of gets us there. Yeah. We know Forge isn't operating as a site, and Amasa Day, and but basically they're 12 properties. And the goal here was really to get the sites activated that are not being activated most effectively. It's like you can go to Hale, so let's not necessarily start there. Let's start with the ones that need a little bit of visitation to them so people can see what's going on. Flip that, though, then you also have in my other ear my collections manager going, that will be crazy to try to get all of the pieces put together for us to do these tours. So it's a bit of a balancing act, and that's how we sort of landed on these several. Isham is a place that I need to do something that has so many awesome, amazing stories and is just phenomenal. And if I can keep, Windows from having major issues and failure, then I will be feeling much better. But so that, we're trying to pick these ones that we can get the community better engaged with, especially whenever they're not being open and people kind of looking at us. This organization has had its ups and downs in the past, and we're trying to make better on that and making sure people are invited into these places. So that's how we got there. I want to just say on the content item, we definitely feel the same, that these are awesome. I had a meeting with there's a sort of an ad hoc group of leaders of organizations that own multiple sites. So it's kind of we don't really know what to call that, but you kind of get where I'm going. And the guy from Nebraska, he said, look at your sites not just as sites, but they are content development centers. People don't necessarily always go to historic houses anymore. It's so much harder to get them to go to those kinds of places. It's a field that is hurting. So why don't you view them as content creation centers and really bringing the stories out? Because that's what people want. They want the stories more than anything else. So I agree with you both on that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Sarah?
Thank you. And I too really enjoyed looking at all of the links that you provided to other organizations that had utilized this technology. I was just fascinated by it and thought it was wonderful. My question for you is actually about the budgeting for those other sites relative to your site and what you're trying to do, because it looks like it's about $3,600 per building, and seeing the cost for scanning buildings without all the wonderful things that you would be planning to do, it felt like the budget wasn't big enough. And I just wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and there were a lot of conversations internally about how we got to some of those numbers. And the short answer is that a digital laser scan is of a magnitude that is a great deal different than what is kind of happening here. While this is essentially a high-end photography scan rather than a digital laser scanning. So it's, in talking with these guys like the Matterport ones, he puts his machine down, it does a scan, he moves to the next spot, it does its scan, and he can do these houses in a half a day. They're very quick types of things, the drone footage. So these are all numbers based on conversations with folks out there. They said, oh yeah, these prices will make sense. You got to think about it more almost from a real estate standpoint. As a realtor trying to sell a house, they wouldn't spend triple or 4 times as much as this. They want to get it quick so they can sell the house. So that's what this is of a level that is just slightly above a real estate type of thing. It's not going to give us, well, I mean, it can give us measured drawings off of it, but they're not going to be that like point cloud level laser scan. It's a magnitude down from that. It intended to be more for the tours and the visual, and then maybe we're going to need to circle back and get the much more detailed version later, if and when we find the funding for it. So that's that. But the numbers seem really low, but because the world has gone this way, they have found that these things are much more cost effective than we sort of would think for these things. So those are numbers based directly on conversations with potential contractors. They've been verified by them, and they feel that those numbers are absolutely on target. In fact, we added about 10% on each one because we felt that there's probably extra costs that weren't being factored in.
And to that point, because I've gone down this path, the numbers are reasonable to hire a firm. However, the expense really becomes the digital specialists that you need to have on your team, on your staff,
right,
that are managing it, constantly upgrading that. So that's not factored in, because then that does become more expensive. And those are the digital specialists, but you also need a digital educator to deal with that as well. So there are those layers that are not factored. This is just the product. So
this is just the product.
You might want to go back I don't abandon the idea, but rethink exactly how the structure, how the timeline and the levels of responsibility to manage your new product has to be facilitated, because it definitely is sustainable.
And to, Sarah, Kathy, well, all of your points on this, we have been fortunate enough that we had a bequest from a benefactor last year, and we're sort of working out how we're spending some of that, and we're putting aside some amount. We wanted to get through this grant process first, but there will be an amount that is set aside to support this, and it may be, as Kathy's mentioning, we may be repurposing one of our current collections persons to do more of the digital stuff. Or it may be that we have to bring in others and we may match this amount. We haven't quite figured that out. We wanted to get through this part first. And then we're going to start putting down the details and going through the bid process and everything. But from a product standpoint, these are those numbers. Yeah. Did that answer it? I hope.
Beth, I see you have your hand up.
I do, and I'm going to be maybe the last person to kind of dig into some of the nuts and bolts. I mean, this is an amazing way to, get out into the digital world and share these wonderful resources. But, to build on some of the other questions, when you are integrating the drone footage in with the Matterport or whatever interior scan, how do you envision that happening? Is that somebody in your back end kind of marrying those, or does Matterport do it, or,
Okay, great question. Basically, you got to imagine this in sort of like 2 phases, but kind of the Matterport and the 360 footage are, the Matterport will do insides. So that's part 1. Part 2 is the 360 outside, and you probably saw that with some of those places. When you step outside, suddenly you're in a Google view kind of thing. So that's sort of part 1. The drone footage then is separate. They don't necessarily connect with each other. The drone footage would be for, again, marketing types of aspects. Using the drone to be able to do, as you were all talking about with these steeples, make sure we're scanning our roofs and all those things so we have that data. But it's a little bit more of a marketing thing. So, you've landed on these websites where you see the cool little fly through, and then you can go to the website. that's sort of the idea with those drone footage. It's not intended to be very intense. The numbers that you see there represent basic flyovers, not anything too dramatic. So that was sort of just an add-on to the primary product of the Matterport/360s.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Aaron, I have a question for you. I've seen the Matterport, I've seen the drone footage. I'm intrigued with what Kathy said about the Flipgrid. Do you foresee what you're asking us to help fund as the means to the end? Or is this a way to start you in the digital world? And do you foresee elaborating on what you're getting, maybe going in a totally different direction for a more immersive opportunities within the next 5 years? I mean, because this kind of technology is changing so fast.
Yeah, it is.
And I'm intrigued by Walter saying that he tried to read the labels on the books, which means he wants to open a couple of those books. And that's kind of what Kathy was alluding to earlier. And so I guess my question to you is, do you see this as an initial step to jump into the digital world, but maybe not the means to the end?
I just, if I can just like pause for a second and just recognize, your question of, is this an initial start into the digital world? We're in 2021. This shouldn't be the initial start into a digital world, but it is. That is definitely what's going on here. I've been working hard to try to get the website up to speed, get our social media going the right directions, all those types of aspects, and get them going. I would hope that it doesn't take us 5 years to get to that kind of immersive level and get more into these kinds of things. Really what this is drawn on in large part is conversations with the Mark Twain House. They saw visitation increases because people were excited about what they were seeing there. We want to drive people to our sites, and how do we get them to come there? I know the Phelps House very well. That has a really low visitation, like really low visitation, and I know people will love that house. And if they can walk in and see that wallpaper and get to understand what they're looking at, and connect with that, it will be really great to make those pieces. So I'm hoping that it's faster, but it is unfortunately a bit of a startup. Yes.
When you do get to the Phelps House, don't forget the barn. The architecture in the barn is just amazing.
And that's why we included outbuildings on this, is because we had a lot of conversation. Some of the outbuildings are really great for adding on, some are not. So it's going to be a matter of this. I mean, there are multiple levels. Yes, this is getting us documentation. Yes, it's doing marketing, but we're also going to be able to do things like if we scan the Hale barns, that's our biggest visitation for people, facility rentals. So, that's going to be an opportunity as well.
Jonathan, all of a sudden my screen went blank. Are we having issues?
Mine too.
Mine did too. Mine also went blank. I'm not sure why.
You can see everybody though at the bottom.
Welcome to the world of digital technology.
Someone may have spotlighted themselves.
Yeah, that may be.
And you can undo that.
Let's see.
All right. Well, we're working with that. Walter, I see your hand is still up, and Beth, your hand is still up. Do you have additional questions?
I don't. I will take my hand down.
Okay.
And I already did. Sorry.
Okay. Are there any other questions from council members? All right. Well, we have a motion to approve the grant. I'll take a roll call vote. Beth Ackley?
Aye.
Beth Burgess?
Aye.
I'll abstain. Margaret Fagan?
Aye.
Leah Glazer?
Aye.
Kathy Maher?
Aye.
Christine Nelson?
Aye.
Sarah Nelson?
Aye.
Sarah Sportman?
Aye.
Walter Woodward?
Aye.
and Ellen Zoppo.
Yes.
Very good. Motion carries. Good luck.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
I'll stick around anyways.
The next item on the agenda is 6B1, State Register of Nomination for the First Congregational Church of Middletown, located at 190 Court Street in Middletown. Marina, do you have a motion, or is there a motion for this type of?
Yep, there is a motion in the Dropbox, but I'll read it.
Okay.
So state register nomination for the First Congregational Church of Middletown, 190 Court Street, Middletown, to the State Register of Historic Places. The Historic Preservation Council votes to list the First Congregational Church of Middletown, located at 190 Court Street, Middletown, to the State Register of Historic Places. I'm not going to say, do I have a motion?
Great, no, thank you. Do we have a motion to bring this to the table for discussion?
Christine, so moved.
And a
Kathy, second.
Second. Okay, great. Discussion?
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you mind if I introduce it first? And we also have guests.
Yes, please.
Great, thank you so much. So staff recommends approval of listing of the First Congregational Church of Middletown, located at 190 Court Street, Middletown, under Criterion 2 at the local level as a well-preserved example of Gothic Revival ecclesiastical architecture, designed in this case to meet the unique needs of a changing congregation, and which illustrates both the use of a Protestant congregation and the changes that have occurred over 150 years of practices. Alterations have been minimal, the most obvious being the loss of the spire due to structural instability, but the church retains its integrity of location, design, majority of materials and workmanship, feeling, and association with the original congregation that commissioned the structure. This nomination is a result of a survey and planning grant through our office that was awarded to the church. They are very eager to see the building listed, and I believe that Jim Miller from the congregation is here, and as well, Dr. Kristen Keegan, author of the nomination, is here to help me answer any questions you may have.
Very good. Thank you. Questions from council members? I can't see anybody, so just introduce yourself and ask.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, it was fascinating to me that you still in your archives have the original specs. So you didn't have to make anything up or guess. And then reading further that you found a time capsule of photographs in a wall. Amazing as well.
Well, we didn't find it so much as document that it's there.
Okay. 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 So are there historic photos then of the north elevation? I know that that's the elevation where there are gates, so you couldn't get into photograph.
Not that I definitely noticed. There was one, there were a couple that were of like children lined up to go into the Sunday school where it wasn't clear which side of the building it was on.
Mm-hmm.
So not that I looked at in the photographs that they had.
Okay, and I was just wondering, it's a very good endnotes and bibliography. The fire in 1968, it was kind of mentioned, spotted throughout the narrative. Can you just describe what exactly was the damage from that fire at that time? And I noticed that the Hartford Courant is probably the most helpful article.
Yes, according to the article, they had a copy of it in their archives. It started, I believe it started as an electrical fire in the sort of the ceiling of the vestibule or underneath the pews that were in the above the vestibule. In fact, I can actually look up the article if you want to wait a second. Let's see, in that folder. Then again, maybe not, because there's a lot of material. Let's see, there's the church archives folder.
Can I weigh in on that?
Go ahead.
And I was not a member of the church. This is Jim Miller at that time, but in 1968, the church renovated the sanctuary and installed a new pipe organ. And I believe, I don't know the cause of the fire, but it was associated with the renovation. That work was being done in the sanctuary and resulted in the destruction of the south-facing stained glass windows, which, as Kristen noted in the report, were replaced with more modern imagery.
Yeah, I mean, the organ's at the other end of the hall, so I don't quite see how that would actually affect it, but I'm not an electrician, so.
Well, the entire sanctuary was renovated, and there were other work being done in addition to the organ at the time. That was at the time of the church's 300th anniversary.
There we go. Blaze causes $75,000 in damages. Whoops, I found it. I just need to turn it around so I'm looking at it right side up. Let's see. There we are. In the midst of a $130,000 renovation, it says the entire main ceiling of the church was replaced. Which I think I didn't notice before. I was focusing on the stained glass windows. As a result of heat damage. So that was probably to the plaster that was up there. The paint crews had completed painting the upper part of the church and started removing scaffolding on Tuesday. Undertaken as the church prepared for its 300th anniversary. So it wasn't just the organ, but they were doing a great deal of work at the time. The seat of the fire was directly in front of the windows, according to this article. I think there was another one. Let me double check. Yeah, same
Chris,
thing.
all of those are in the endnotes, right?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, so all of those referenced. So yeah.
Yeah, and they're in the church archives as well.
Yeah, which is, I have to say, as you guys know, I'm only a a shepherd for these nominations. I don't write them. I provide, guidance as I go. But I really, this particular nomination, both Jim and Chris, really kind of lent themselves and their knowledge and their expertise to this nomination. I just really wanted to commend them for, some really detailed work, especially Chris's research regarding the architect, which appeared to show stuff, that really wasn't readily available.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council?
Leah?
Yes, Leah.
Hi. So this is just more of a where things are, or just some clarification. You mentioned a company, the IQT, a building survey firm. I was wondering if that stands for anything, and if that, I don't know, some just more, more information on what that means besides the letters. And then also, when you're describing it, you do explain what the specifications said, but it's always my understanding that in the description, you're just explaining what is there exactly, and then the other kind of architectural significance information goes in the second section. So that's as much of maybe a question for Morena about sort of how things are organized.
Yeah, so I mean, in this particular instance, usually when you go into the analysis, it would be in that second section. In this instance, I found that it was, as far as a narrative form, it was helpful to kind of marry those two together, just because there was so much information that in that second point, I didn't want it to be glossed over. So it was really just a matter of, style choice. We don't, so, for instance, normally I guide people when I say this property is significant under criterion 1 at what, under criterion whatever, at local whatever, in the area of. I do that as a guide, but people can make stylistic choices as they want to. We leave it there so that, especially for state register, it's difficult for people who have never written a technical document before to keep that format. In this case, I felt that it was appropriate to pair them together, but if you would prefer it to be moved to the second section, that's, the council's prerogative and Kristen's prerogative as author.
I mean, I'll see if anybody else, has an issue. That's just always how I've understood it, that it's the current kind of condition, which is the description, and then sort of the more interesting part, in my opinion.
Right.
Sort of
I tried to point out as I went through where the current condition departed from the specifications at a number of points, especially in the matter of some of the doors. But most of it was pretty much the same as far as I could tell as the specifications. Which is one reason why I sort of melded them together. It seemed much more easier to talk about them both at the same time rather than have two sections that talked about the same material twice except slightly different.
So the point is that what is there now matches the specifications almost exactly, like there's no difference, is that?
Except where I mentioned, yeah. So, obviously some of it has been revised or replaced. As far as IQT is concerned, when I looked them up, it seems to be they just call themselves IQT LLC. They do CAD drawings and 3D building documentation and so forth. Say building survey services and systems firms headquartered in Tampa, Florida, with offices in Boston and Hartford. So they just called themselves IQT.
But I'm sure it stands for something, but
probably in their heads. But I mean, if it was me, if I had to guess, I would say it's something like IQ Technologies because they're really bright or something.
Right. And then just another point of being explicit under the historical context, that first sentence, when you say for a Christian congregation, maybe just be more specific about what kind of Christian congregation, just because there's so many different denominations. And then you get into sort of the different iconographies between Catholic and that's just a little more specificity that seems pretty important in Connecticut, where there are like 1 million different denominations of Christianity. Not 1 million, but
quite a few.
Quite a few.
Are there any other questions?
This is Christine, not a question, just a statement. I learned so much from this nomination work about the architecture, about the history of the religion, and the architects were fascinating too. I don't know that I'll ever walk into a congregational church again and not wonder at what point in history any little flourish was added or not added. So thank you for your work. It's a fantastic history. I love it.
Thank you, and you're welcome. It was fun. It was interesting to me too, because until I did this research, I didn't know any of that either, to be honest. I knew about Gothic architecture, but the question that came to my mind, why is this congregational church so Gothic looking? So we found out.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right. We have a motion to approve the grant. I'll take a roll call vote. Beth Ackley?
Aye.
Beth Burgess?
Aye.
I'll abstain. Margaret Faber?
Aye.
Leah Glazer?
Aye.
Kathy Mahar?
Aye.
Christine Nelson?
Aye.
Sarah Nelson?
Aye.
Sarah Sportman?
Aye.
Walter Woodward?
Aye.
Nell and Zeppo.
Yes.
Very good. Motion carries.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is threatened properties. Todd, for an update.
What happens now?
Hi, folks. So I have an update on 3 of our ongoing, or at least ongoing up until recently, threatened properties. Stanford is still in negotiations with the Attorney General's office, but we expect a conclusion as early as this week. EPA has ruled that it is an undertaking, and they are involved. We have a meeting with them this afternoon for the permitting required for the Blickendorfer cleanup.
Todd, what does that mean?
So one of the roles that our office does is environmental review under Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. So anytime there's federal funding or permitting, our office reviews it for compliance to make sure it meets the Secretary of the Interior standards if possible. If not, we resolve the adverse effect through a number of different things. We had asked early on, 6 months ago, more than that actually, if EPA was going to require, was going to trigger the Section 106 process. When it's unclear, like when there's permitting, it's clear that there's a trigger. Sometimes it's unclear, and in this case, it was unclear. But they did decide that they were going to trigger because they have that right, the federal law, which then allowed our office to review it under the Section 106.
Great, thank you.
So that's ongoing. As I said, we're meeting this afternoon with EPA. We hope to wrap at least that portion of this situation this week. Where we are at with that is that the Blickendorfer would be demoed. The first 5 bays would be demoed, and then they would retest. They had originally wanted to take down 7 bays and then retest, but we've negotiated that to 5. And in return for the loss, they will be putting in writing that they will be putting the building back in service, within 24 months of permitting, local permitting. Planning and zoning, which is good. So, our goal had always been to save this building, and not only will we be saving it, but it will be putting it back in service. And as we all know, how important a building being used is to its ongoing maintenance. So we're hopefully wrapping that up this week. The other 2 is, as you recall, we HPC had referred the Norwalk case to the Attorney General's office last month, 2 months ago. Right after that, the owner withdrew the demolition permit application, and they will be keeping the majority of that house. Also, good news with Clinton, which was a couple of months prior, after HPC had referred it to the Attorney General's office. They too withdrew their demolition application and agreed to not demolish the building. So good work, you guys. If you have any questions, I can answer them.
Todd, this is Sarah. On the Clinton one, are both buildings saved?
No, well, yes. You may recall that the corn crib is not original to that site. So they are actually moving it to an historic site and rehabbing it. Not the owners, but they found somebody who was. I mean, there was a lot of interest in that corn crib. I mean, it is a 19th century corn crib in excellent condition. The actual corn crib, not the the 1980s edition. So it has a new home now.
So Todd, does that mean they have to? They're going to reevaluate the approach for entering the site in order to save the house and renovate the house? Or they're going to...
Yeah, so what they're looking at now, what they're going to determine now is because of the market, whether they're even going to go forward with the project. And if, because, you know, some things has changed, you know, just in the 6 months that we've been involved with them. If they do move forward, they're going to then determine if they're going to rehab the building and incorporate it into their development, or they're going to button it up for future use or still off the parcel, but they're going to keep the building.
Gotcha. Great.
Which is kind of the strength and the weakness of SEPA. You know, the Connecticut Environmental Protection Act does not require that the owners rehab the building. All it requires is that they do not destroy the building. So, you know, we always try to negotiate some way to incorporate it. So, for instance, Manchester, which was 6 months ago, that you guys referred to the Attorney General's office, we negotiated with them an agreement where they withdrew the demolition application, and now they are designing they are developing that site to be incorporated into their business plan. So the building won't be used for residential, I don't believe. We're actually waiting for final drawings on that, but they are incorporating it into their business. So they're going to use it for, you know, visitors or office space or something, which is good. We want our historic buildings to be used, because if they're used, then they'll be maintained.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you. Any other questions for Todd? Okay, great, Todd. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the report on State Historic Preservation Office. Jonathan? Hello, Jonathan.
I'm sorry, I thought I clicked myself off mute. Okay, sorry. Just a few quick items to update you on. The first being the Historic Restoration Fund grant program. Aaron Fink, who is with us today, manages that program. And I think I mentioned last month that that program had shifted from a rolling application schedule to a semi-annual application. Those applications were due in May. And so we are gearing up for next month's meeting of this council, where we will focus on reviewing those applications that will be forwarded to council for consideration. And just for the newer members of council that aren't familiar with that program yet, that is our capital construction grant program, which is capped at $100,000. So again, the July meeting will focus specifically on those. Julie Karmelik, our tax credit reviewer, sent me a few things to update you on. The first being that during the month of May, the Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit Program issued 2 vouchers in New Britain for larger projects. The first one being the Porter Block building on Main Street, and that resulted in a tax credit voucher of $2.1 million. And also the Hatch building on Washington Street, which resulted in a tax credit voucher of $629,000. So those were both very successful projects. Also, Julie wanted to know if anyone had any upcoming events with any organizations you might be involved with. She's getting ready to put out our June newsletter. And if you have anything you'd like to include in there, you can shoot her an email and we'll add that to our newsletter. Moving down to appointments to the Historic Preservation Council, I am still working through getting all of the new appointments made. I did send over one additional name to the governor last week. I do still need 2 additional candidates or more. If you are aware of anyone that you think might be a good fit or might be interested in joining, please let me know. Send me an email. And my final item for SHPO is, I believe I did mention this at a few meetings ago. We have been working with a gentleman named Jack Doherty at Trinity College to develop an interactive map that's going to be hosted on our website. And this will illustrate the grants, all the historic preservation grants awarded by this council over the past 5 fiscal years at the moment. We just gave the green light on that project, so we are very excited. It should be completed this summer. We'll be able to visualize our, put our grant programs into this visual tool. We'll be able to sort by grant program, location, fiscal year. Several of SHPO staff, Mr. Doherty will train us on how to add additional data to the map so we can move forward with additional awards. We'll add those in as they go. We can also go back and add legacy data as time allows, which will be really helpful. So you'll be able to click on a specific project. It'll bring up information about the property, the scope of work, the grant type, award amount, dollars leveraged. It'll be a really, hopefully easy to use tool for advocacy, and will hopefully generate some additional interest in our programs.
Sounds
That's
great.
all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Next item on the agenda is report on museum properties. Liz had to step off. Is anybody?
Yep, that's going to be me as well. I'll read through Liz's report here for the museums. The Eric Sloan Museum and Old Newgate Prison are less than a month away from reopening the first weekend in May. Nope, that is an old report. Hang on one second, I apologize. Liz seems to have sent me her April report.
Okay.
I apologize.
That's fine.
I will see if I can find the new one and I'll let you know. Thank you.
Okay. And then under the next item on the agenda is new business. And we wanted to have a discussion about the grant funding gaps. And I'm hoping Mary is still online here and lead the discussion.
Sure. So actually, maybe the new council members don't know, but you know, over the last year or so, there have been concerns that the amount of grant funding we offer, you know, may not be enough to cover the types of products that we're helping our applicants with. A lot of this does relate to construction costs and the HRF grant. But it kind of just led to the idea that maybe we should discuss what the caps are for HRF and for survey and planning. We get a lot of requests to increase the Historic Restoration Fund cap from 100,000 to what it was previously at 200,000, or at least historically. Currently, our survey and planning grants cap at 20,000. But we generally require a match, so that would actually provide up to $40,000 for any given, you know, pre-development project. Certainly enough for a designation project. But there's always room for discussion. If we raise the cap on Historic Restoration Fund grants and survey and planning grants, that will mean fewer grants that we can award. However, you know, it might actually increase the quality of the deliverables that we receive. So I think we just wanted to throw it out to the council to just get your thoughts or input on the idea of maybe raising the cap on our grants. Currently, for historic resources inventories, we offer up to $30,000 without a match, and that has proven to be sufficient. You know, we might give out a $30,000 grant, then the project goes out to bid, and the proposals come in at between, you know, 22,000, 28,000, depending on the number of buildings that the survey is going to require. I think, you know, council would be your input would be very valuable to kind of get a better idea of what certain deliverables cost, like conditions assessments, architectural plans and specifications, and whether, you know, with the match, $40,000 is enough for a project. I know it really depends on the project costs and all of that, but just throwing it out there for comments or discussion.
So I guess I'd like to get Erin, let me just interject for a second. So Mary, it's a catch-22 because your pot of money is not growing.
Right.
This discussion is about increasing the individual grant amounts. And as you indicated, you know, if the grant amount goes up, then there's fewer grant opportunities.
Correct.
Okay.
But then again, $200,000 3 years ago doesn't get you as far as it did 3 years ago.
Right.
So
that's
it's
something I wanted to raise. One of the applicants needed to completely redo their scope of work and their budget because they went to Home Depot and saw that a sheet of plywood is now $90. So I think we have to consider the rise in construction materials. I don't know if it's just this year and it'll go back down, but so that's one thing that I've been struggling with with HRF is just how expensive construction materials have been during COVID, and no one really knows if it's going to go down. So I just
Well,
want
we
to
had
raise.
this conversation pre-COVID. Sarah, you did that entire brilliant program, pulled together cost escalations, and it was obvious that costs of doing projects in relation to, you know, many of the nonprofits that our programs serve, they're not making, you know, they don't have increased revenue at the same level as these cost escalations. So there is an enormous gap. So what would happen years ago, a one-to-one match prevented a lot of organizations from even being able to apply because they simply couldn't make the match. So that predicated, you know, what they could do or if they were eligible. We don't go through the rigors that we went through years ago. I mean, we have electronic now, but you had to attend a mandatory class to apply if you even wanted to apply for an HRF grant. So I think that there are a lot of factors, but yeah, it's true. I mean, lumber, you know, pick a material and a chain, a timeline chain to even get materials now. So it's a nightmare.
Mary, this is Sarah Nelson. I've got a question for you. Does DECD, have they addressed this in any sort of analysis in a meaningful way in terms of cost escalation in their programs, like a temporary increase to be reexamined and what that might be? I'm just trying to gauge if there's anything that's been already thought about by the state.
That they very possibly may have. I'll need to connect with our partners over in that area. I can't imagine that they haven't, considering, you know, that this is what they do. So yeah, that's a really good suggestion. I will.
It's almost as if projects that were in the works whose budgets were developed in 2017, 2018 that are rolling out now need emergency supplementals because there is such a gap. You know, that's happening right now. And if there was, and I've actually brought it up a couple of times, not aggressively, but you know, that's coming. But it's, you know, it's a situation where I know there's a lot of people in the same situation. How do you scale back your project to meet a new COVID reality in the construction industry?
Yeah, and just Kathy, to add on to that, and also Aaron, a comment that you made as well about somebody kind of having to reimagine their project. For one particular project that I have some familiarity with, they had to break it into 3 phases. So it's 3 construction cycles that they're going through. So 3 sets of overhead costs and 2 sets of escalations. And so the danger of just having somebody do a smaller project is sometimes everything is so inextricably intertwined. If you're doing the windows, you got to do the siding, and you got to do the flashing and the painting, and it's really hard to draw an arbitrary line to meet a budget. That's not answering Mary's question about should we be considering it. It's just talking about the implication of as these construction dollars get smaller and smaller in terms of what they buy, it puts some difficulties onto applicants in terms of project formulation.
I have a thought. It's Beth Ackley, or some questions maybe. You know, there's such a variety of projects, whether from the consulting end or the construction end, and from, you know, building owners that are well funded to ones that have barely any resources at all, and how they choose to lean on the grant funding process differently. You know, and being new to the council, I don't know if there's any history of data gathering to understand this better. I mean, clearly there's potentially some urgency with the short-term materials issue that might not, that, you know, data gathering might be a little bit of a time-consuming thing, but on the bigger picture, you know, to understand, maybe through a survey or something, to understand, you know, on an individual level, how building owners perceive how effective the grants are from a cost perspective. And maybe there's some very specific questions around that, but it just seems like there's such a variety of situations that maybe some data gathering might be helpful to answer that. The engineer speaking.
I agree with the engineer. And I wonder, in our long-term thoughts around this, are we talking about rolling it out now, or, you know, what's the time frame? Because Aaron, you have all these applications right now, and so we wouldn't be theoretically upping that. It would be rolled out after these two applications, periods, that is. So when and where? Like, things might change by December, please. Maybe with construction costs. So it's complicated here. I think the data is necessary now, in fact.
Well, maybe more immediately, Mary, you asked if the cost of conditions assessments and things is still accurate. Did you want to, since yours is monthly, maybe we tackle yours first and then think more about HRF after we do some data gathering?
I have learned that conditions assessments are a varied species, so it really depends. I've tapped into some of the expertise on the council and learned a lot from Sarah and Tom. But this discussion, as it seems to veer towards escalating construction costs, I think whatever decision is made, it doesn't have to be across the board. Like a state register nomination, you know, could cost as little as $10,000. If we offer a $20,000 grant, if the applicant doesn't know what to ask for, they ask for the 20. So I don't want things to. I think we can be a little more precise in that regard. I think the unknown really is the construction aspect. And then if we reinstate the match on the survey and planning grants, that does effectively double the amount of funding available for a product. But yes, I have started to veer into the realm of trying to figure out what products, not what they should cost, but well, what should be the expected deliverable based on the amount of funding that an applicant can offer. But since we do offer those on a rolling basis, any change can be quickly implemented. I think the HRF grants, I mean, I think 100,000 is a lot of money, but it's a drop in the bucket for so many. But if it, you know, if we, and there's no regs or statutes that prevent the council from deciding to offer a lot more. You know, it would just mean fewer grants, but maybe more meaningful projects. You know, something to consider.
I wonder if there's a way to offer two levels of HRF grant to address the issue of, you know, smaller projects not getting funded because they didn't have a match available if there was a higher maximum. I think that's a legitimate issue. But then for other projects, right, it's a total drop in the bucket. So I wonder if there's a way to restructure them a little bit or scale them so that there's a couple of choices.
I mean, that was sort of the reasoning, well, part of it when the 50% intercept to CIA happened a couple years back. We dropped the HRF cap down to 50,000, but we kind of reimagined the program as really maintenance and repair, not major development projects. And so I believe it was helping, but people just have bigger projects, and we'd like to be part of bigger projects. So, but we could tier it that way, 50,000 for smaller, and just kind of help the applicants understand what project costs might be, and therefore what a reasonable grant budget would be.
I think that's a good idea. Just creating that middle tier, so it doesn't, Mary Donahue, for all the old timers, literally said to me once that the big HRFs are not for the faint of heart. They require a lot of work. And they did, and justifiably so, if you're using tax dollars. But finding that middle ground for the smaller organizations that desperately need a roof, is a viable solution.
Yeah, I was going to add, Mary, I kind of, and Aaron, more importantly, I like this idea. And I see, though, rather than being as creating two things within the same program, maybe what you really need to think about is dividing it up, because then you can dedicate funding to it. So it's not like you're robbing small groups to feed big groups, or, you can dedicate a certain amount of funding, and it creates a different amount of competitiveness within each grant group.
I think that's a good idea, Kathy, and I think that maybe also relies on the data about how many projects they're receiving that are these larger projects versus how many inquiries or proposals you get for those smaller maintenance repairs. I think, and I think that's, one of the things is I'm sure Kathy, Mar, as being, sage of wisdom here, remembers different iterations of all the programs, is that if you give somebody a maximum award of $200,000, they're going to apply for the $200,000 regardless of whether or not they need it. So I think, having those tiers of programs and maybe explaining to them, and even just doing things like examples of this type of work include, I think maybe just having some sort of straightforward communication would be.
And to Marina's point, that's why there was a mandatory class if you were going to apply for an HRF. And I sat through those.
Well, and I'm
We'll
curious
make it driver's ed.
now. I'm curious now, without that class, say, how much education Mary and Aaron and everybody are needing to provide for applicants to help them understand, I'm thinking about construction, but also it's even murkier, I think, for conditions assessments. I mean, we, on a regular basis, we talk about at least 6 different types of offerings that might be included in a conditions assessment. And, maybe streamlining, thinking about all of it and streamlining how these things are defined, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because, you guys have to do a lot of educating. And so could we streamline it, but also create some, maybe it's not a day-long class now. We have all these Zoom things, but maybe there's some kind of mandatory video that's presented and created and presented to explain to people a little bit more about what their building might need, so that they can, assess that for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
All these things take tons of work, but to say ideas.
Yeah.
Well, right now we usually send out a circuit rider and they sort of talk about our programs, and then Mary and I will do a call together and see if they need planning first or if they need to come in for maintenance and repair first. So it's a lot of talking them through the project. So if we had a video, that would be wonderful or something.
Didn't have to talk to people.
Yeah. So I think that's a really good idea. Yeah, I love that.
And it does provide, I still want to talk to people, but it does provide a good reference that they can keep on, I know we have guidelines and things on the website, but it would be good to have something that they could just readily look at, so they're not missing things. it's only really fair because so many of our applicants just are so new to the whole world of state procurement, of project management. It can be daunting.
Mary, this is Tom. 2 questions for you. Right now, it's my understanding we do not require the match for the survey and planning grants. When is that going to be reinstated?
Actually, it would be reinstated as of this meeting. However, at the May meeting, I believe it was, it might have been the April meeting, the council did, because I had such a backlog of people that had applied well in time to take advantage of the match wave, the council did agree to honor that, even though the applications will not be heard probably, I mean, with HRF in July, they may not be heard until August, September,
But moving forward, as of today, a new grant opportunity does require the surveying grant. So then, all right, that sounds great. So with regard to the HRFs that we're talking about, how does the $100,000 cap fit within the plethora of applications that you've received for next month?
I would say that there's only maybe 1 or 2 that would have gone for an amount greater than $100,000. These are smaller projects and smaller organizations that don't have the capacity or the match in place.
Mm-hmm. So do we require a match right now, or is that going to be reinstated as well?
The Historic Restoration Fund does require a match. I believe it's in the statute, so we were never allowed to waive that.
Right.
Oh, I wrote down here that it's without a match. Somebody said that earlier, without a match.
That's only survey and planning.
Okay.
At this point.
All right. I just want to get my notes correct. Okay. Yeah. This has been something that I've been on the council now for almost 2.5 years, and almost from the first month, we started having this conversation. And the cost of materials has just skyrocketed, and getting materials to the site and getting contractors to the site, and the cost of labor. Let's not forget labor costs as well.
Aaron, for these HRF grants, we're comfortable with the budgets that are submitted. I mean, we don't want people getting, an amount and then coming back saying plywood is $90,
There's 2 that had proposals from 2020, and I'm suggesting that they revisit those and just hoping they have them in time for the July meeting, because they look low now based on the numbers we're seeing. So that's another thing that kind of worries me, is that they applied even in, May. How have the numbers gone up just in these couple of months? So,
wow.
Yeah.
I know it's for the council to discuss, but I think we should explore raising the cap on the HRF grants, and then getting a better idea of what factors influence a budget for a pre-development grant, so that our applicants are asking for the appropriate amount of money for pre-development, and we're able to provide that, especially if they provide a match. But it sounds like the volatility is really in the construction part, and 100,000 just isn't. And granted, all of this is in the context of, CIA doesn't produce unlimited money. We still have to have a budgeted amount that we can actually grant. But
so is there potential for wiggle room in an elevated $200,000 project to allow for some or a percentage of soft costs? Because speaking from a place of experience, that's often a dead stop for projects.
I don't think the statutes address that, and we don't have regulations for the program. So I think that is up for traditionally, soft costs are not part of a construction project. I don't believe we're prohibited. In fact, when Alyssa was here, we went back and forth on how to, somebody would submit an HRF application and they just needed, this bit of soft money, and they'd have to come all the way back to me, get the grant, do the work, and then apply. And so it would be nice, and we've tried to think about how we can do that, and if we can do that, to just incorporate a certain percentage of or something.
Even if it was just a percentage of admin consultants, that's always enormously helpful, because that can just stop projects from moving forward.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I see next month on absolutely every HRF grant is the funding sufficient for absolutely every one of them. So maybe when they're presented, you guys can short circuit that question by saying funding has been confirmed, we're good to go.
Okay.
Because I'd hate to approve a lot of them and have them find out that they just can't afford to do their work.
Right.
Because of all the work that the contractor has to put together to get updated material costs.
And Tom, just to add to that, Aaron, when you're talking with them about escalating the budget, it's not to this month, it's actually 4 to 6 months out, because of the time that it takes to get under contract and the funding agreement and get out to bid. So you're actually talking about a future time.
Right. Good point.
And we know it's hard, but it's the reality. They're not going to want to hear that, but that's the reality.
And in terms of helping somebody with future escalation, if somebody says, how do I even go about that? It seems to me that there's some industry benchmarks that you can go to, like Turner Construction, the one that we looked at before when we were talking about escalation, might have something. DECD might actually have something in their economic forecast. And Beth, are you aware of any other resources for future escalation?
Consigli's been publishing, they published something a couple months ago with, and I don't know if they just use that as a marketing tool and sent it around, or if they have it published somewhere, but it, it was showing their prediction for different materials and the escalation. And I haven't looked in a little while. I haven't looked to see if anybody's talking about, at this point, updating the timeline. It's a supply chain issue, I think, a lot of it. And so at some point, in the not too distant future, hopefully it'll be fine. I mean, maybe that's glass half full, but part of it, I think we just don't know. That's the hard part. This is just uncharted territory. And so I don't know if, and I know we're kind of, this is a big, long discussion, but, maybe there's an opening to say, yes, we approve your grant in this amount, but, if just thinking out loud, this could totally be different. But if your contractor comes back in 6 months when you're ready to start building and the market has just kept going, come back and we can talk about what that looks like, because we want to help you. I don't know.
Yeah, I wondered if they came in for $100,000, but we raised the cap to $200,000, and they realized in the meantime that they needed an additional $50,000, if that's something that council could vote on, an additional amount. And I'm not sure if they've done that before, or Mary, if that sounds terrible.
Council has done that before, very rarely, but a couple times. When we raised the cap from 50 to 100, there was one applicant who realized they needed more And they only asked up to the current cap of 100, but it was awarded.
And it seems to me that that would have to be on a case-by-case situation, otherwise we're going to get inundated.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Okay.
Well, I don't mean to cut us short, but it's afternoon and I got to prep for another meeting. So I don't know if we're close to being done. I'm sorry, everybody.
No, that's fine. So Mary, Aaron, I hope that was helpful. You know, maybe we can continue this, but maybe that'll get you started.
Yeah, no, that there's a lot of great ideas, and maybe as a staff, we should take some time just to kind of just talk this all out and see what we can come up with.
Okay, great. Good, thank you. Kathy, if you need to go, you can step out.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
See you next month.
Susan,
Bye-bye.
stay well. Bye-bye.
So the next item on the agenda is the liaison with public and private agencies, Jane and Mary.
Tom, Jane put something in the chat. I didn't know if you wanted to read it. She had to run for another meeting, but she did give a brief update in the chat.
Jonathan, I actually don't know how to get to the chat.
Oh, I'm happy to read it.
Yeah, go ahead. I see it over there now, but go ahead.
Okay, sure. So Jane said, hi all, I have a 12 o'clock call to get to. Update from Preservation Connecticut. We have signed a contract with the consultant for the Olmsted Survey Project. We are excited to announce that Red Bridge Group will be working with us. An internal kickoff meeting is scheduled for this week. Our virtual program Talking About Preservation series will focus on the project and announce the project team next week on June 9th at noon. Join us if you can. Sign up is on our website, preservationct.org. Thanks.
That's fantastic. That'll be a great project to watch.
Yeah, and Jenny Schofield is still on the meeting. I didn't know if she wanted to add something because I know she's been heavily involved in that group.
Yeah, I'll just add that this is a joint project between SHPO and Preservation Connecticut. The person who's leading the Red Bridge group is Alicia Luba, who's a former New England field director for the National Trust. So she moved on from that post, but many of us have worked with her through that. And the team includes, it's very exciting. We'll tell you more about it, but the team includes some assistance with heritage tourism. It includes Lucy Lawless from NAOP, whose former career was with the Park Service, and she helped develop the cultural landscape inventory program there that if you do landscape work, many of us have used. So it's very exciting, and we'll have a lot more to say, and you'll see a lot in our social media over the course of the year.
Thanks, Jenny.
Sounds great. Thank you, Jenny. Is Mary still with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners. So fingers are still crossed, but this may be the first time since Governor Rell's administration that the budget's not going to touch Community Investment Act funding. So hopefully that will stay where that is. Two pieces of legislation that are moving through the process. House Bill 6606, which is for putting together a working group concerning economic development in distressed municipalities, specifically addressing incentives and impediments to renovating historic properties. That was passed by the House on May 18th and is ready for action for the Senate calendar. That bill was sponsored and raised by the Main Street Working Group. And then the second bill is House Bill 6547, which is an act concerning a working group regarding protection and preservation of historic properties. That legislates for a 13-member working group to study putting a plan for supporting and facilitating efforts by municipalities, historic societies, and nonprofits for preservation of buildings, structures, objects, sites, and landmarks. That just passed the House yesterday and isn't on the Senate calendar yet. We'll be particularly watching that because it's kind of skewed towards historic societies. I think there's still, while we do a lot of work together, a misunderstanding among the public and the legislators between the difference between a purely historic society and then a group that's mostly concentrated on historic preservation, but we will be hopefully working with representatives on that. And then finally on the national scene, Bill Krause, Preservation in Connecticut, has been working very hard on getting word out about the Historic Tax Credit Growth and Opportunity Bill, which is called HTC Go. He's hopefully working to get Representative Larson, who's on the Ways and Means Committee, to be a co-sponsor of that bill. Also, Nina Caruso and Bill Krosky are working with the National Trust Community Investment Corporation as well to get that bill. And hopefully I'll be getting more language soon so we can send that out as a CPA newsletter to get people support and how they can send their support into Washington. That's all I had.
Great. Thank you, Mary. That's it for our agenda, other than to let everybody know that the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, July 7th, again at 9:30 in the morning. And unless somebody has anything else, we'll have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved, Margaret.
And a second?
Second, Sarah Nelson.
Great. Thank you, everybody. See you next month.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.